Hello, Froggy here, and today I'll be showing you how to break into the Atraks Captain box. Doing this will allow you to damage the boss as soon as he spawns in, but believe me when I tell you that this is more of a novelty and exercise in guardian ingenuity than a real cheese. Back when the raid launched, you could break into the adjacent room and damage Atraks there. But after a few failed attempts to stop us, Bungie gave up and moved him to this far-off box in the distance. The only plausible way in would be with an interdimensional res breach. However, there were some complications. In order to do that, we need an Auto Rez, and the only one in between the first and second encounter happens at the end of this cutscene. Additionally, all Guardians must be present and alive for the cutscene to start, and any Guardians that then die will have their ghost appear in this room. Meaning, even if you got out and managed to trigger the IRB, you would still res in this room. But, luckily, Matt and Corolla found a way around this. It turns out there is another important trigger point. Right here. If you skip this trigger, the door doesn't close and the Auto Rez doesn't trigger. With that discovery, it all became possible. So to do this, you're going to want to start after the first encounter. A checkpoint works as long as the checkpoint is from immediately after first encounter and not inside of second. So you're going to continue the path as per usual until you get just before the statue room. You don't want to touch where Corolla is shooting because that will trigger the dialogue. If anyone gets that, you'll have to restart, so perhaps save the checkpoint on a different character in case you mess up. You will need everyone to do this, or I suppose they could leave and join back afterwards. Because if you don't have everyone present for the cutscene, it won't start. You could also go up and to the right to bypass the trigger, but that's a little bit riskier. Once everyone makes it in, you'll notice that the cutscene plays, but the door is still open. At this point, you can feel free to head out, and here's where the fun really starts. You want to be very careful to retrace your steps and avoid the trigger once more. Because as soon as you hit that trigger and you get that dialogue, you'll have triggered the Auto Rez and once again, we'll have to restart. But luckily, that's the only thing that can mess this up thanks to some clever work by Corolla with the help of Icy Nip 7. But we'll get to that in a little bit. First, we need to get back into Restricted. Luckily, that's possible using a default spawn that I ran into in the very early days of Beyond Light. I believe it was the second day of the expansion since I couldn't log in for the first one. Sure, that won't happen again. Anyways, once you load into Restricted, you'll want to die using your favorite means of explosives or ricochet rounds, and you'll spawn way back at the beginning. If I had lowered my light before then, it would have been much easier to die. And we'll be needing to do that again in a bit, so I'd recommend setting your light low now. Now you'll need to do the Dropbox glitch. There's a fairly convenient spot for that, just to the right of where you would be going into the building for first encounter. This will cut us outside of the box barrier surrounding the playable space, and allow us to fly up to where the Atraks Box would be and die in midair. So you'll want to have someone set up a sparrow upside down and then leave and rejoin so it'll be around permanently. Then simply pull up to the side drop a sparrow off, make sure you have a ride prompt, and ride sparrow once it gets far enough down, which that was not. About 7 to 8 seconds should do it. Let's give that another go. And there we go. So to orient yourself, I recommend looking for the giant Vex structure out in the distance. You'll want to fly to the right of that until you have cleared all the ice up above. After that, you can make your way upwards. This will take a while. Coincidentally, probably longer than the Atraks encounter. Anyways, once you get towards the top, you're going to want to look for the lone floating ice structure. That is a good approximate landmark. Once you're in front of that, you'll be looking for a very particular lineup. This is what Corolla managed to find with the help of Icy. Just flying up to get a good vantage point. So on the right side, you're going to want to look at the little notch and follow that line out. On the left, you want to look at the line between light and darkness, which is so very thin. I recommend lining up with the light and darkness first, and then once you're pretty much lined up there, you can work on the other edge. Just a little bit more to the left. That's about good. And a little right here. Now we just need to worry about our height. To line that up, we're going to be looking for this sort of triangular structure here. We need to die a little bit below that. Since your sparrow will probably be falling when you hit it with an explosive, I would actually recommend lining up right at the height of the triangle, and then just waiting about a second before you shoot it. And if all went well, we should have died within the space of the Atraks box. It's a fairly large target, so you don't have to worry too much. Plus, you can just do that sparrow flight again if you mess it up. It only takes several, 5, 6 minutes. It's not that bad. So now we just need to get out of the map to die to the load. It's important that you don't die until then, so, maybe practice this before you do it for real. There are many places where you can sparrow breach through these walls with a dismount. I like the corners. Just want to go into the side and dodge and dismount. Might take a few tries, but there's a nice convenient landing spot here. Corolla showed me this death to load. I feature a few other deaths to clarity control in other videos, so if you want to do those instead, I'll give a link to one of those videos here.
Guardian down.
This one has the benefit of being able to just retry if you mess up, instead of having to leave and rejoin. I'm gonna go ahead and set my light back up so I don't forget to do that for the actual Atraks encounter. It would be pretty embarrassing to hit him for immunes. So this part is slightly tricky. You want to fly over to the left here, close to the pushback. Naturally, if you're in it, you can't sword fly. And we're just going to land on this structure here. If you go too far to the right, you'll hit the load, and if you're unlucky, have to do the entire sparrow bit over again. So right around here is where we're going to be dying to the load. You just want to line up with this edge, and I had the most luck walking backwards. If you don't die to the load, it is pretty easy to try again. You'll just want to climb back up this pipe here, and then cross over to the other side. The little cross beams are good for standing on. Once you're on the other side, you can just jump back over the little wall here to load back into restricted. And now we can do that again. It took me a few times to die to the load here. We found that it was the most consistent when we turned around backwards and just brazenly walked into the load. If all goes according to plan, you should find your ghost inside of the Atraks box. At this point, you should wait until you have as many people as you plan to inside. You'll need at least one person to trigger the Auto Rez and start the encounter. You can see Castaway here is stepping into the trigger we so carefully avoided before, and now we're in. Except for Gumballer. He was a bit too high up. But that has its own perks too, so not a total loss. At this point, anyone who dies will respawn inside of the cutscene room, which is convenient for the person who's going to be starting the encounter. In the meantime, you should get all of your gear ready, because you'll only have 5 seconds to fight Atraks. With enough people and the right loadout, it should be pretty easy to zero floor him. Unfortunately, he goes immune, so you can't get the complete kill, so you will have to do the last stand. If it weren't for the joining allies, or if you could leave a damage source that would last the full time, it would be possible to kill the captain during final stand. But as is, you're going to have to hope that the scanner spawns in time and just do it the old-fashioned way. And there we go. Time to enjoy our well-earned loot. Although, perhaps not earned in quite the intended way.
You have no warnings left. Nuclear descent protocol initiated.
Well, before I head out, I figure I would rant a little bit about the previous path for doing this. So, without the solo setup, the first thing we needed to do was get someone out of the map to spot the box. Technically, there is a way to get out of the map at Spacewalk currently with a Titan. However, the path is very finicky, and last time I tried it, I gave up after 3 hours, so probably not what you want to do. And if you don't do that, you're going to need to use an IRB. Which, luckily, there is a good IRB for Spacewalk. Unfortunately, in order to use an IRB to get into Spacewalk, you would need 2. One to get into Spacewalk, and the second IRB into the Atraks box. But we don't have 2 Auto Rezes in a row, so we end up having to do the first one before first encounter, and the second one after. This has a number of fun complications. Means you have to do first encounter first try without dying. And also, there is no way to leave first encounter unless you have brought a sparrow with you. So you need to bring a sparrow to breach out and then do this rather tricky sparrow maneuver to get back. And of course, if you die doing any of this tricky sparrow business, you have to restart because there is no retrying this one. But if you jump out way to the side, you can summon a sparrow and fly back on top of the encounter areas, and from there you have to just kind of launch your sparrow into the void and hit the load in the right spot to be outside of the map in the statue room. And if you miss that, you guessed it, you have to restart. And then you need to have someone else bring a second sparrow so that you can Dropbox. And naturally, if you get flip sparrow instead of ride, you have to restart. And you have to wait for the sparrow to drop far enough, get on, and dive to the true edge to do the IRB. And you have to have multiple people do this, and if any of them that you need to get in fail, you'd have to start over. So yeah, I'm glad we've got that solo lineup.